Memories in Orbit may look like just another Metroidvania full of secrets and areas to explore, but if you think you've already mastered the game, get ready. Today, I'm going to show you 7 advanced tips that will completely change the way you play. From movement tricks the game never really explains properly, to hidden mechanics only the most attentive players have discovered. I'm Mary, so grab your controller and come with me, because after these tips, you'll never look at MIO the same way again. This infinite aerial reset mechanic is an absolute game changer for anyone playing. When you realize that every hit in the air, whether on enemies, drones, purple bulbs, or even floating debris, resets your double jump, the game turns into a completely different kind of aerial dance. It's that moment when you understand you don't need to touch the ground anymore as long as you have enough targets to keep jumping, and that completely changes your approach to combat and exploration. The game already has agile movement with the robot MIO, but this specific trick unlocks a level of mobility that feels almost broken in the best way possible. The real strength of this technique shows up when you're fighting tanky bosses or stuck in those vertical shafts infested with flying enemies. Instead of staying on the ground trying to dodge ground-based attack patterns, which in MIO can be pretty punishing considering you have few hit points, you can literally pogo on enemies and stay airborne indefinitely. It's like turning every flying enemy into an aerial step, creating your own moving platform while dishing out damage. This not only keeps you safe from ground-based attacks, but also gives you total control over the pace of the fight, choosing when and where to attack. The feeling of staying in the air, constantly hitting flying enemies while going up or down vertical shafts, is incredibly satisfying. It's one of those mechanics that separates players who truly master the game from those who just get through it, because it demands precise timing and constant spatial awareness. You need to know where the next targets are so you don't fall. And once you find the rhythm, it's almost hypnotic. Jump, hit, reset, jump again, hit, reset. It becomes a fluid choreography that makes you feel like a fully in-control robotic space ninja, even when surrounded by dozens of enemies. Mastering this technique also helps compensate for some of MIO's combat limitations, like the short attack range and the basic 3-hit combo. When you're constantly airborne and resetting jumps, those limitations matter less because you're always repositioning, always creating new attack angles. It's especially useful against tougher bosses, where you need room for error, and considering the game doesn't let you heal during boss fights and can even permanently reduce HP in certain situations, staying airborne and away from ground danger can be the difference between victory and total frustration. Man, this hairpin grapple technique completely changed how I see movement in MIO. At first, I just held the grapple all the way through, but when you learn to release it at the peak of the arc, it's like the game gains a whole new dimension. The feeling of preserving that momentum and flying through the level is insanely addictive. You can literally feel the difference in speed and distance you're able to cover. It's one of those moments that separates someone who's just playing from someone who's truly mastering the controls. Chain grappling is where the real magic happens. When you chain release plus jump plus new grapple in sequence, you basically turn into Spider-Man in space. I use this all the time in boss fights, especially when those patterned projectiles start showing up. Instead of panicking on the ground trying to dodge, you just chain grapples and dance through the air while the boss fires into nothing. It's incredibly satisfying when you nail the timing. What I love most is using this to reach those hidden secrets in the upper parts of levels. You know that platform way up there that makes you think, can I even get there? With chain grapple, you almost always can. The key is aiming diagonally, because that gives you way more control over your trajectory. Sometimes I spend minutes just testing different angles to see how far I can go. Honestly, mastering this technique turned MIO from a cool game into one of my favorite Metroidvanias of the year. The learning curve is worth every second. When you finally manage to chain 3 or 4 grapples in a row and cross an entire room without touching the ground, you understand why the developers invested so much in this movement system. It's pure flow state. This aerial pogo mechanic is one of those things that separates basic play from truly understanding the game's flow. When you strike downward on an enemy, it's not just about dealing damage, it's about turning every enemy into a living platform that keeps you suspended in the air, resetting your double jump, and giving you full control over vertical mobility. It's a mechanic that forces you to completely rethink what enemies are. They stop being obstacles and become strategic trampolines. What really makes this technique shine is how it breaks the limitations of slower, heavier bosses. While they're stuck on the ground with telegraphed, predictable attacks, you're dancing above their heads, literally making half of their kit useless. It's almost unfair when you get the timing right. The boss is down there, frustrated, while you control the fight from above, choosing when to dive in to punish and when to stay safe in the air. This approach also completely changes how you handle vertical rooms and platforming challenges. Instead of carefully calculating every jump in fear of falling, you can simply use enemies as improvised stepping stones, maintaining height indefinitely if you know how to chain directional attacks correctly. It's the kind of thing that sounds simple on paper, but in practice demands precision, rhythm, and timing, exactly what MIO asks of you to reach that perfect flow. What's most interesting is that downward strikes don't deal damage by themselves, yet they're still one of the most valuable tools in your arsenal precisely because of their jump reset function. Even a wrong attack can be useful if it keeps you mobile and strategically positioned. This kind of smart design is what makes MIO stand out among other Metroidvanias. Every mechanic has multiple layers of utility, and mastering these nuances is what turns a difficult fight into a perfectly choreographed aerial dance. In MIO Memories in Orbit, those dead-end rooms never inspire much confidence, and that's exactly why they deserve your attention. Many of them hide breakable walls, but the game rarely makes it obvious. It's always subtle details, a different glow, an off-pattern texture, a corner that's a bit too well lit to be a coincidence. When you start training your eye to catch these visual cues, exploration stops being about following the obvious path and becomes almost a mini investigation game in every screen. The fun part is that the game rewards suspicion really well. Behind these fake walls, you can find important upgrades, especially modifier extensions tied to the allocation matrix, which basically open up even more room for you to experiment with your build and tailor the character to your playstyle. It's not just, oh, I picked up another collectible. It's real progress in combat efficiency and mobility. Every secret you find like this makes the next challenge feel a bit more under control. And when you combine this with grapple chains, exploration levels up in a really satisfying way. Those hooks that once felt like part of the main path start turning into pieces of advanced parkour, where you break a wall, chain a grapple, gain extra height, and reach platforms that didn't even seem possible. It's that moment when you feel like the game isn't just giving you upgrades, it's teaching you to think vertically, to see the whole room as a playground. The best part is that feeling of I'm cheating the level design, even though you know everything was placed there intentionally. When you walk into a room, spot a strange glow on a wall, break it, chain grapples, and come out the other side with a new modifier extension, there's that rush of understanding the game's language. And MIO works a lot like this. The more you read visual cues and abuse mobility tools, the more the map stops being a hostile labyrinth and becomes a space you confidently dominate. Using fast travel early completely changes the feeling of being stuck in a massive map. Those torn overseers, the broken robots near each network gate, are basically your official shortcut to avoid endless backtracking. The idea of reconnecting them to the spine fits perfectly with the game's theme. You're not just activating a teleport, you're literally reconnecting dead nerves of the ship and regaining control of that sector. Once you understand this logic, every new network gate stops being just another checkpoint and starts becoming a strategic hub. Found a portal? First thing to do is hunt down the busted overseer nearby and reconnect it, even if you don't plan on using fast travel right away. This builds a fast travel network that only becomes more valuable as the map opens up and biomes grow more distant and complex. What really makes everything efficient is using custom pins on the map. Instead of relying on memory and wandering aimlessly later, it's worth marking important spots, areas with suspicious secrets, paths blocked by abilities you don't have yet, or even optional bosses you want to revisit when you're stronger. With fast travel active, these pins stop being just visual reminders and become practical routes. You pick a gate, teleport, and in seconds, you're exactly where you wanted to test something new. All of this creates a great sense of planning instead of wear and tear. Instead of feeling like the game is punishing you with repeated walking, you start using overseers as part of your mental route for exploration. When you combine well-distributed fast travel with a map marked your way, backtracking stops being a necessary evil and becomes a tool in your favor, almost like you're building your own transportation grid inside the ship. Swapping loadouts before a boss is honestly one of the smartest ways to play without becoming a slave to grinding or perfect execution all the time. At network gates, you can experiment with more radical mods and test combinations you normally wouldn't dare take blind into a major fight, because there, you control the risk and enter combat with a clear plan. This kind of build flexibility is very characteristic of the game and fits perfectly with the customization-focused design it sells. The trick here is understanding that the best build isn't always the safest one. Sometimes it's the most aggressive or the weirdest. Removing a mod like self-awareness can free up mental space and slots for a more straightforward strategy, and using something like Nacre Drought to gain extra slots gives you that delicious feeling of, okay, now I can finally put this puzzle together the way I want. For me, it almost becomes a ritual. Before a boss, I stop, look at my mods, and think, what's the dirty idea I can try now? And that's where penalties and retry assists, which many people ignore, come in. Eroded bosses reducing enemy HP on repeated attempts up to 25% changes the psychological weight of the fight. Instead of every loss being pure frustration, you start seeing it as accumulated progress, like the game saying, all right, you're hitting a wall here. I'll give you some leeway to keep the rhythm. It doesn't replace learning patterns, but it turns a difficulty wall into a staircase and encourages you to keep adjusting your loadout until it clicks. And pacifist mode is another tool that, in practice, protects your time. If the goal is farming, testing drops, or simply crossing an annoying area without becoming a fight magnet every 2 steps, avoiding aggro changes the mood of exploration and lets you focus on what matters at that moment. It's the kind of option that doesn't seem glamorous, but once you use it properly, it becomes part of your quality of life kit in the game. Cristalice Nacre, for me, is that golden rule that separates a smooth run from a chain of cascading disasters. Before any risky section, trap rooms, tight platforming, or a boss you haven't fully read yet, I treat processing Nacre like insurance. You prepare now so you don't pay dearly later. This resource management mindset fits perfectly with the game's focus on progression and survival during exploration. The reason I insist on always is simple. Unexpected deaths happen, especially when you're testing a new path. If you enter a risky situation with raw Nacre and things go wrong, it feels like you lost twice. You lost the attempt and the resource. With processed Nacre, both the emotional and mechanical loss are much smaller. It's a small habit that, over hours of play, becomes what keeps you moving forward instead of getting stuck in frustration. And that's where ground healing, assist mode, comes in as the second pillar of this tip. It's the kind of setting that seems optional until you take 2 hits, drop to low HP, and realize you need a real breather. Waiting 5 seconds on the ground to gain an extra shield changes the rhythm of combat and platforming because it gives you a planned recovery window, a tactical pit stop, instead of relying solely on perfect execution all the time. In low HP situations, this is literally the difference between regaining control and getting deleted by the next small mistake. Now, The most important part, and where a lot of people mess up. Ground healing only works if you can exit the critical state and stop in a safe place, so you can't treat it like a panic button. For me, the right way to use it is building the habit of backing off a bit before hitting red HP. Take a step back, find a clean piece of ground, wait the 5 seconds, get the shield, and return to the fight with a different posture. When you combine this with always processing Cristalice Nacre whenever possible, the game stops punishing you with total losses and starts feeling much fairer, even when you're taking risks.